Common knowledge, in the technical sense, refers to the state in which I know something, you know something, I know that you know it, you know that I know it, I know that you know, ad infinitum. Technically, even if there are 3 levels of thoughts about thoughts, 17 levels of thoughts about thoughts, it's not the same as an infinite number of thoughts about thoughts.
Professor Steven Pinker, welcome to the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with an easy question. What is a public intellectual, and are you one?
I suppose a public intellectual is someone who comments on both affairs of the day and long-standing issues about how we understand the human condition, making use of knowledge from the world of university research, literature, someone who traffics in ideas and makes them widely available.
You are one of many public intellectuals, I guess, academics, who write for the lay public. Do you think there's a right balance of academics who write for the lay public versus for their peers? Should there be a different balance? Should some people hang up their hats from doing columns for the New York Times and go back to academia full time? How do you think about, where learning should happen?
The huge enterprise of university scholarship and research, in theory, all of it should be made available to the public. The public is paying for a lot of it through taxes, through perks. So if universities aren't just taking in each other's laundry, that is, professors writing articles that are going to be read by other professors, then all of them should be making their ideas accessible. And by the way, this would actually help the conduct of scholarship too. Most academic writing is dreadful. Dreadful not only in the sense that intelligent lay people can't understand it, but fellow academics can't understand it. Often I come across papers in my own field. I don't know what they're talking about.
So who's the audience? So why does that happen? Why does that happen?
Well, I wrote a whole book on that. It's called The Sense of Style, the Thinking Person's Guide to Writing in the 21st Century. Well, I think the main impediment to clear writing is a psychological phenomenon that's called the curse of knowledge. Namely, when you know something, it's very hard to imagine what it's like not to know it. And so academics will use abbreviations and jargon and generic language instead of concrete descriptions of who did what to whom, because it's just so obvious to them, and they assume it's obvious to everyone else, which it isn't. Sometimes not even to people in their own field who just don't happen to be in their own labs or don't happen to be in their own heads. So I think because academia can be insular, you have small circles of professor, grad student, postdocs, research assistant, undergrads. They meet every week. They all know each other's lingo. And it doesn't occur to any of them that they've got to actually explain what actually happened in the lab. If you're doing studies on kids, do they actually see toys or puppets as opposed to stimuli or conditions? They talk in meta concepts like framework, level, paradigm, approach, instead of the actual content of ideas. So there's a lot, and this would, I think, as well as making knowledge available to the curious public, which is a good thing, it would make knowledge available to one another and hasten the progress of understanding even within academia.
I also feel like there's, over time, I've discovered that there's a disconnect between the way one hears a sentence or a paragraph in one's mind and what happens between the mind and the fingers on the keyboard, that I dictate more than I used to, because I think the way I'm thinking about it as I speak takes away the barrier of expectation of yourself when you actually have to type a sentence. There's a lot of pressure to type out a good sentence. There's less pressure to say a good sentence, at least in my view. And the other, I don't know if you have a view on whether or not student writing has gotten better or worse over the years. Let me ask you that first.
Well, it's very hard to judge over the years. I find that the problem with student writing isn't so much the undergraduates who are still in the habit of writing.
Speak English.
Speaking English, but it's the grad students who often mistakenly think that the lingo, the terms in their own little lab group are universal, and also they are often terrified of appearing naive or simplistic. And so they try to often to sound as sophisticated as possible, which often means that they are as opaque as possible. But there is something to be to reading your own prose aloud, to actually mumbling it as you write it, because readers listen to their own voice as they read something, and the rhythm and sound of a sentence, even if it's on the printed page, are alive in the reader's mind, and they affect how easy it is to understand a sentence. It also flags sentences that are too long and complex, or phrases that are hard to kind of attach into the overall meaning of the sentence. When you say them aloud, you might realize that you're leading your reader down a garden path and analyzing the words of a sentence wrong. And so and it just simply makes the prose more graceful if it conforms to the rhythm and melody of the English language.
Yeah, people, in an effort to impress others with their knowledge, I think that's what you're saying, resort to overly complex structure and $20 words. When I think the most impressive writing to me is from somebody like yourself and others who are deeply, deeply educated and credentialed and wise about something, but speak in simple sentences.
Yeah, well, and it isn't just trying to impress. That's the most common theory of why.
What else is it?
So much of. Well, no, it's the curse of knowledge. That is, people are actually oblivious to the fact that not everyone knows what they know. And so they may not be trying to impress. They think they're being clear, and they're not, because they're clear to themselves, but they're not clear to anyone else.
Isn't that a failure? So to me, isn't that a failure of empathy in the following sense? That the writer has not put himself or herself in the shoes of the reader.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly what it is. Yes.
Let's get to your book.
Okay.
Your newest book. When Everyone Knows That Everyone Knows, ellipses, : Common Knowledge and the Mysteries of Money, Power, and Everyday Life. There's a lot of punctuation going on there, sir.
Yes. The ellipses are
why is that?
Dots. Those 3 dots are meaningful, and in fact, I had to argue with my editor to keep them. He worried that the indexing services on Amazon and Library of Congress would choke on the 3 dots. Although then I convinced him that there are a number of books out there that have ellipses in their titles. The reason is that common knowledge, in the technical sense, refers to the state in which I know something, you know something, I know that you know it, you know that I know it, I know that you know that I know, ad infinitum. Technically, even if there are 3 levels of thoughts about thoughts, 17 levels of thoughts about thoughts, it's not the same as an infinite number of thoughts about thoughts. Now, so the 3 dots are to signify that common knowledge is not just when everyone knows that everyone knows, but also when everyone knows that, and when everyone knows that, and so on. Now, of course, it raises the question of how could a mortal human being with a finite brain represent an infinite number of I know that she knows that I know that she knows? The answer is that I have a whole chapter on that called Reading the Mind of a Mind Reader. One possibility is that we think a few levels and then think to ourselves, etc., ad infinitum, and so on, ... That is, we just have an abbreviation that indicates that this is a sample of an infinite series without actually thinking through the infinite series, which of course you can't do. But another possibility is that when something is self-evident, when it's public, when it's conspicuous, when it is out there, that gives us the intuition that everyone knows ad infinitum, even if we don't have to think all those thoughts. And I think the feeling, the sense that something is out there, you can't take it back. It's in your face. It's the elephant in the room. That's what that intuition captures the abstract concept of common knowledge, even if we aren't reeling out all the I know that she knowses.
You realize that when you do the whole I know that you know that I know that you know, it comes across like a Abbott and Costello routine.
A little bit, or like
that's confusing to people.
That who's on first? Actually, it's more like Better examples would be the fairly well-known episode of the situation comedy Friends.
Yeah.
There's two of them have been caught in an affair,
Right.
and
Right.
the rest try to play practical jokes, but the couple knows that they are aware, and so they play practical jokes on the people that are playing practical jokes. And at one point, one of the characters, Rachel, says to Joey, they don't know that we know that they know that we know. Joey, you can't say anything. And he says, I couldn't even if I wanted to. There's also a sequence in The Princess Bride that people have pointed me to. There's a cup that is poisoned, and each one is trying
Yes.
to think
With iocane powder.
Yes, exactly.
So when you talk about common knowledge, let's break it down a little bit. And then I want to ask you about the emperor and whether or not he has clothes. When you say common knowledge, you're not talking about sort of a basic fact, like it's common knowledge that the United States is comprised of 50 states, or that the sky is blue. What are you talking about?
So it's an unfortunate bit of jargon in some academic disciplines, economics, mathematical game theory, logic, philosophy, linguistics. The term just is stuck. But in this sense, you're right. It does not just refer to something that is widely known or conventional wisdom, but it refers to something that is known to be known, and that is known. When everyone knows that everyone knows.
Right. So give us a simple example of that.
If two people are trying to rendezvous, for example, and each one knows where the other one likes to go. I know that she likes to go to the bookstore. She knows that I like to go to the camera store. Then even if each of us knows where the other one likes to hang out, it's not enough for us to rendezvous. Because she, knowing that I like to go to the camera store, might go to the camera store, but then she, knowing that I know that she likes to go to the bookstore, might then second guess herself and say, oh, I better go to the bookstore after all. And it's only if both of them know that the other one knows, which they can generate by a conversation. That's why we have language. That language can generate common knowledge and cut through everything in a stroke, where if you blurt it out, if it's said in a public setting where you know the other person has heard you, or you know that they know that you have heard them, then that generates the common knowledge. In any public event, an announcement, a public demonstration, a broadcast, that is where you hear it and you know that everyone else is hearing it. That generates common knowledge. And that's different from everyone merely knowing something, because everyone might know it privately, but not know that anyone else knows it.
Right. So for example, if tell me if this makes sense. When you go into a Broadway show and the announcement is made before and at the beginning, no flash photography, it's not only important that you know that no flash photography, but you know that everyone else has been told the same thing and everyone else knows. And so when someone breaks the taboo, there can be a group reaction to that. And it also causes you to be more obedient to it. Is that true?
Yes, that's right. So that would be a fine example, because you do have common knowledge. And in general, norms, things that people just know you don't do, only work when they're common knowledge. That is, you could trust that everyone else knows it and knows that everyone else knows it. So even things like, not smoking in a public place, picking up your dog poop after walking your dog, not telling ethnic jokes, things that aren't sometimes as in the case of pooper scooper laws, there is a law and technically there's punishment, but it's not like you have cops on every corner surveilling the entire public as to whether they're obeying it and willing to write a ticket at that very moment. Generally, these norms work simply because when everyone knows that everyone knows it, you're kind of entitled to informally enforce it by looking daggers at the offender, by telling them to stop. Ordinarily, if there wasn't common knowledge that that's a norm, in this case that there is a law, someone could say, go to hell, it's none of your business. And then they could force you to back down as opposed to you forcing them to back down. But if there's common knowledge, this is the norm, then generally the enforcer of the norm can expect the violator to back down as opposed to vice versa. And I have a whole chapter on authority, dominance, saving face, challenging someone's face, and how common knowledge of who gives way to whom makes a lot of social life possible. But conversely, when it's challenged, that's when you often get interpersonal violence.
What this keeps making me think of is our entire regime of traffic conventions. Who has the right of way, when you're allowed to pass, at a stop sign, who has the first go, who has the second go. That's enforceable because I know that you know, and you know that I know who's supposed to make the first left turn and when you're supposed to pass. And then the second part you mentioned is when there's a violation of that, you get, I guess in that context, road rage. Is that
you can. Well, you get
is that a fair application of your principle?
Yes, exactly. You get road rage usually when they neither one or one of the two doesn't recognize the norm, is either not aware of it or has a different interpretation of who has violated it. And often it is, why do people come to blows? Sometimes they're homicides as a result of road rage. In fact, a lot of homicides are the result of trivial altercations, of curses, of minor signs of disrespect, which then escalate into a fatal feud. Those are often cases where neither one recognizes that the norm says that they give way to the other. Or someone who is habitually giving way wants to change the norm, wants to establish their dominance. No, you get out of the way from me. I don't get out of the way from you. If both of them think that, neither one accepts the norm as to who comes first, who gets the right of way. That's when you get these altercations.
So the very, very famous well-considered story by Hans Christian Andersen about The Emperor Has No Clothes. That has singular foundational importance and meaning to these concepts that you elucidate in the book. Do you want to remind people what the story is and why it's important?
In fact, I begin the book with the story of The Emperor's New Clothes because it's a story about common knowledge. When the little boy said the emperor was naked, he wasn't telling anyone anything they didn't already know. But he was still changing their knowledge. How come? Because now everyone knew that everyone else knew that everyone else knew that the emperor was naked. So he was conveying information, even if it wasn't that the emperor was naked. He was conveying the information that now everyone knows that everyone knows the emperor is naked. And the reason that that was significant is that it allowed the people to coordinate their change in their relationship to the emperor from obsequious deference to ridicule and scorn. And that ability to coordinate, if you're the only one challenging the emperor, then you got to wonder if maybe something's wrong with you, or at least you have to fear reprisals from everyone else. But if all of you recognize it at once, and that's what common knowledge allows you to do, then you've got the power of numbers, more important, the power of solidarity, more generally, the ability to coordinate. And that's what was granted by blurting out the observation in public, where everyone could hear it and everyone could see that everyone else could hear it.
But so the conceit is, the reason foundationally that it unfolds the way it unfolds is the emperor is told, am I correct, that he's being given clothes, but it can only be seen by certain kinds of people.
Well, on the converse, that the only people who can't see it are, in various versions of the story. Andersen actually adapted it from an older folk tale. In the older folk tale, if you couldn't see it, that means that you were cuckolded.
So it's a bad thing. So everyone had an incentive.
It is absolutely a bad thing.
Right. So everyone had the incentive to say, look, I can't see it, but my eyes must be lying to me because I don't want to have that other quality, either having been cuckolded or not being smart or whatever the case may be. So it's a little bit of everyone wants to be in the club and goes along with the falsehood for the reasons you say, because everyone doesn't know that everyone else knows, and that spell hasn't been broken.
It's a state sometimes called pluralistic ignorance or a spiral of silence, where everyone mistakenly thinks that everyone else believes something and no one actually believes it. And it happens when expression of an opinion is punished or in danger of being punished. And it can be broken by the little boy saying the emperor is naked.
In that example, it's a good thing, right? The truth comes out. The blind can see. The farce, the hoax unravels, right? And the elites are wrong. And the ordinary people see that the emperor actually doesn't have any clothes. And that's kind of normatively a good thing. Sometimes the emperor does have clothes. And when I say that, I'm thinking about other examples of things where in modern society, a view develops that something that I know and that you know and everyone else knows is actually wrong. For example, the efficacy and safety of vaccines. I feel like in some ways, in certain communities, there's a replication of the emperor's new clothes going on there, where people are enjoying a common revelation with other like-minded people about vaccines. But that's wrong. Am I missing the point here?
Do you mean like skepticism about vaccines,
Yes.
or
Yes.
a denial of the efficacy of vaccines?
Correct.
Yeah, although there it's not exactly analogous, because it's not as if it was something that people knew all along but that they kept to themselves, but rather it's spreading of bogus knowledge. That is.
Well, but you're saying it's bogus knowledge. They don't think it's bogus knowledge.
Oh, yeah, I am saying it's bogus knowledge, and you're right. They don't think it's bogus knowledge, and they're wrong. And I'm saying that not because I'm infallible, just because there's enormous amount of evidence if one looks at it dispassionately. But yes, it's people get their sense of knowledge, that is what they believe, usually from some trusted authority or institution, because none of us really has the time or expertise to get to the bottom of every knowledge claim. We have to trust that certain cliques, certain institutions have earned the right to be taken seriously in their claims. And what we often see is that now different segments of the population trust or distrust different institutions.
Right. So you talk a little bit more about that, because what you describe for society to work, as you write, there has to be trust in these institutions, because no individual can be expert. I think it's a New Yorker cartoon that's one of my favorites. It's a husband and wife couple. I'm going to get it slightly wrong, and either the husband or the wife calls out from the bedroom, "I found something NASA missed." Right.
That's right.
There seems to be a lurch, and maybe this has happened before in history in much worse ways, but there seems to be a trend away from the reliance on expertise. Does any of your thinking about common knowledge and what you research and write about in the book explain that?
Well, to be honest, that's not, it's not what the book is about, and that this isn't the umpteen zillionth book to try to analyze what's happening in 2025 and what's with fake news and conspiracy theories, although I do deal with that somewhat in my previous book, Rationality. So this book is really about it's a book of science and philosophy and economics and psychology about the human condition. So the answer is I'm not commenting on what's happening like today, even though it's true a lot of interviewers.
Right, but the human condition is relevant to politics, and you do talk about bubbles, economic bubbles, and you talk about meme stocks. That's current today stuff that your work has a bearing on, right? Do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, so that's a phenomenon that is directly related to the phenomena of the book, common, in this case, common expectation. It's a general phenomenon in economics that was pointed out by John Maynard Keynes back in the 1920s, where he asked people to consider a beauty contest, a newspaper beauty contest, where the object isn't to judge the prettiest face. The object is to guess what the most other people will deem to be the prettiest face when everyone else is doing the same thing, trying to guess what everyone else will guess, what everyone will guess is the pretty face. And he compared that to speculative investing, where you buy a security not because you think that its present value is necessarily
all the values and what other people think.
Well, yeah, so it's not just that, there's a factory, they buy machinery, they're going to turn out widgets, they're going to sell the widgets at a profit, I'll get a share of the profit. But a lot of people buy stocks because they think, well, I think that it's going to be worth more in the future. And so if I buy it now, sell it in the future, I'll make a profit. Why would it be worth more in the future? Well, often it's because other people think that other people think that other people think that it'll be worth more in the future. And so a lot of the phenomena in economics that are not predictable by standard, supply and demand and present value, the irrational exuberance, the bubbles, the busts, the depressions, the panics are driven by common expectation. That is, people getting in the heads of other people as they get in the heads of other people. In the opposite direction of a bubble, like appreciation of a stock. Like in the case of a meme stock, by the way, the term comes from cases where an influencer posts something that cues people to the possibility that some stock will appreciate, which does make it appreciate, at least for a while. The famous case was the video game store GameStop, which, like a lot of bricks and mortar stores, did not have great future prospects for making a profit because people buy things online. They don't, get it into their cars and park and walk into a store. But, and its stock price was tanking for exactly that reason, for fundamentals. But then an influencer named Roaring Kitty, I think his real name is Keith Gill, talked the stock up, and people started buying it because they knew that a lot of people were following this guy. And if they were all following him, then they knew that other people were following them. And so if he talked it up, it meant that people probably would buy it. And so it soared before it crashed. Then a year later, he just posted a cartoon of someone sitting up in their chair. And that was enough to send the stock up through the roof again. The converse is when you get a bank run where people lose confidence in a security or an institution. People might withdraw money from a bank, not because they think there's anything wrong with the bank, other than they fear that other people think that there's something wrong with the bank, and everyone withdraws their money before so many people withdraw their money that the bank can no longer cover its deposits. And that can cause a bank to fail, which in 1929 led to the Great Depression. And so there have to be means of stopping this reverberant doubt, this self-reinforcing expectation of failure. And so that's why we have, Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued a bank holiday. Just no one could touch their savings for a few days. That just reassured people that other guys aren't withdrawing their savings because I can't, and it calmed down the panic, followed by federal deposit insurance, where as advertised by big gold seals on the window of the bank, the bank couldn't fail, at least up to a point, because the feds would bail it out if people were not in danger of losing their savings because of this insurance. Not that the insurance necessarily had to be used, but just the fact that people knew it was there meant they were less likely to fear that other people feared that other people would fear that the bank was shaky.
Is part of what you're describing also what explains the store of value for digital currency like crypto?
Yes. So in the case of, there are two aspects to cryptocurrency, as there are to any kind of money. There's what actually backs it up. In the case of crypto, there is the common knowledge that it is the value resides in a public ledger, encrypted but public, that prevents embezzlement or fudging the books. And that is common knowledge. Anyone with enough savvy can look at the
and there's trust
ledger,
in that.
the blockchain. Well, the thing about the blockchain is that the blockchain itself, the genius behind it is that you don't need trust. That is, the encrypted algorithms ensure that it can't be hacked directly.
But you have to have trust in that fact that you just mentioned.
You have to have trust in
yes.
that fact, or
Yes.
or if you're savvy enough, you can verify it for yourself. You can
Yeah,
look at the
yeah.
algorithm. You can see how it's encrypted. But on top of that, though, the reason that so many people buy crypto isn't because it's just secure. That is, it's safe against inflation, it's safe against government confiscation, but for speculative reasons. Namely, they think that other people think that it'll be worth more in the future, so they buy it now in the hopes of unloading it in the future at a higher price. So that depends on common expectation of rising prices,
Which changes.
increased demand, which changes, and which of course it can inflate, and it can also pop.
So if you're trying to be a savvy observer of either economic trends or other trends, what are you supposed to do?
Well, what you're supposed to do, and I talk about a famous theorem from in the realm of common knowledge. The sound investment advice is don't speculate, don't act on a hot tip, don't try to time the market, just buy an index fund, a boring basket of securities.
Right. Well, that's what I do. But if you're trying to make it bigger, and you start to see signs that people are really into tulips, don't jump on board.
Well, yeah, on average, some people, if they jump on board early enough and they get out early enough, they can make a killing. On average, though, not everyone can, because and so yes, don't speculate on tulips or anything else, unless of course you have inside information, which is often illegal.
Well, don't do that. I can tell people don't do that.
Don't do that. That is a way to make money if you really do have inside information. Very few people don't. The reason is, in general, and this is what ties it back to common knowledge, is that prices of securities are an estimate of the present value of some security. And the thing is that in a large open market, that's common knowledge. You know the price, everyone else knows the price, everyone else knows that everyone else knows the price. If there's some scrap of information suggests that it is underpriced, that the company is coming out with an insanely great gadget, or there's going to be a crop failure, so stock up on soybeans now. The thing is, everyone else already knows it. They've already bid up the price to what it is worth at present. So unless you're really, really early or have inside information, the current price, which is common knowledge, already reflects the present value of the stock. So you're not going to make a profit by buying it at the current price, which incorporates the common knowledge of its present value.
So you're talking about economics. Is there, to the extent you want to talk about it or address in the book, relevance to these concepts and principles to our politics?
Yeah, there are a lot of political phenomena that depend on common knowledge or common belief, common expectation. One of them is the American primary process, where the nominee for one of the major parties is selected in a rolling set of statewide elections, beginning with New Hampshire and Iowa. The reason that common knowledge is relevant is that there's often a field of anywhere between 4 and a dozen candidates, and people, since we have a voting system called first past the post, where whoever gets the most votes wins, and everyone else is out in the cold. People try to game the system. They don't want to waste their vote on determining who comes in at 6th place versus 7th place. If your vote makes a difference, it's only in deciding between 1st and 2nd place. And so people don't just vote for the candidate they think it would be the best president, but the one they think the most other people are going to vote for, which of course depends on what those other people think that still other people are going to vote for. The result is that anything that is salient, public, that seems to make a difference, that catches everyone's attention early in the process, can lead to momentum and to a winner, not because they're necessarily preferred by everyone, but because some event makes everyone think that other people are going to vote for them. In the case of Joe Biden in 2020, for example, he sprinted ahead of the pack when Jim Clyburn, a representative, endorsed him just prior to the South Carolina primary. Now, I don't know even know how many people had heard of Jim Clyburn before that event, or why his endorsement should make so much of a difference. Well, sure, it was going to nudge the African American vote in South Carolina and give him a push. But the fact that everyone was talking about it as if it were a big deal made it a big deal. Everyone had at least some reason to pick one person out of that entire field of candidates. Conversely, sometimes there can be a gaffe, an embarrassment that will sink a candidacy for no particularly good reason, other than that people think that other people are bailing out, and so they bail out.
It makes me think the system you describe, where only the winner matters. And so people are thinking about what other people think. In the system of ranked choice voting, is that upended?
That's
so
right.
Right?
That's one of the arguments for ranked choice voting.
Yeah, and do you believe, based on your work, does that afford a greater degree of respect to the autonomy of the voter or the preferences of voters?
Oh, it's got a lot of advantages. There's a famous theorem in the mathematics of voting from Kenneth Arrow that no voting system is perfect. If you think about all the things you want a voting system to accomplish, you can't have everything. But the one that we have, first past the post, has very few advantages. So anyone who studies voting systems says the one that we have now sucks. I mean, there's just no question. Nothing's perfect, but a lot of possible systems are way better than what we have now.
So ranked choice voting is at play in the city that I'm sitting in right now, the city of New York. What are some of the advantages of that?
Well, the advantage is that, the main advantage of any of the alternatives to first past the post is that you are likelier to get a candidate that is preferred by the most people, or at least dispreferred by the fewest people. So in the case of the obvious case is when you've got three candidates. If you have two candidates, it doesn't make so much of a difference. If you've got three candidates, there can be big trouble. There can be one candidate who, let's say he's on the far left, and 34% of the voters prefer him or her, but 66% for the other two, but they're split evenly between them. The two, say, centrist candidates, 33 and 33. So you have a candidate that is preferred by barely more than a third, and he can win. And meanwhile, 2/3 of people are unhappy with the choice. They didn't get the kind of policies that they want. If you have either ranked choice where you rank them, and if no one gets a majority, then the lowest ranked candidates' votes get reallocated to the survivors, and so on. Or if you have a runoff or an instant runoff, then which winnows it down to two, and the votes that go to one of the losers get reallocated to the two-way choice, then you can prevent that minority victory from happening.
It's maybe a silly question, but if we had a national, popular vote plebiscite for president after the primary process, would that be better than what we have now or not?
Well, it would be better because the Electoral College introduces additional perversities. In particular, the winner-take-all feature of the Electoral College, that anyone who gets 51% of the vote in a state,
which magnifies the first past post issue that you're talking about.
Well, I think it introduces other distortions, because even if you had direct voting in a plebiscite, as soon as you had three candidates, the problem of the minority candidate winning reasserts itself. So certainly direct voting would be better than the Electoral College, but the direct voting should have either a runoff or ranked choice or one of the other alternatives to the first past the post system.
So this idea of common knowledge, how does it get undone? What changes? So let's say today there is common knowledge in the way you define it and describe it. What things happen to cause that common knowledge to shift?
Well, usually it's something that is public, that is out there. Like the little boy saying the emperor was naked within earshot of everyone else. Or in the case of economic phenomena, a viral post by an influencer, or a statement by the chair of the Fed, which is often why the Fed chair watch their words very, very carefully, lest they set off a speculative bubble or a panic. Alan Greenspan, who was chair of the Fed for many years, said, and I quote him in the book, "Since I've become a financial leader, I've learned to mumble with great incoherence.
Yes.
If I seem clear to you, you misunderstood what I said."
Right. These things that you mentioned that undo common knowledge, the emperor has no clothes.
Well, that generates common knowledge.
Right. Or I don't know if this was in the same category, but there was a moment during McCarthyism where a lawyer said, "Sir, have you no decency?" And things kind of changed. But those nobody the person uttering that statement could not have predicted that things would change. Is there any predictive value so if someone's trying to change the landscape of what is common knowledge, is that a hopeless endeavor?
No. Well, some people have the platform that they know that they will be seen and seen being seen. In other cases, you're right that it can be capricious, that what, as we now say, goes viral is hard to predict. But virality is a common knowledge generator. That is, virality means it increases exponentially. And as we know, exponential growth can saturate a population of any size, often very quickly. And so something that has the power to go viral can, you never know, result in common knowledge. If, again, it's not enough that everyone gets the message, but everyone has to know that everyone else is getting the message. But there are predictable ways of generating common knowledge, and they're exploited. Obviously, a leader giving a presidential address, a fireside chat, can generate common knowledge. In advertising, big events like the Super Bowl are common knowledge generators, and advertisers know it because when they advertise some product that only works if enough people adopt it, say that when the Discover card, the credit card, was introduced, the problem they faced was no one was going to apply for a credit card if they didn't think stores were going to take it, and no store would take it unless they thought a lot of customers were going to use it.
Chicken and egg problem.
And so the Discover card was announced in an ad on the Super Bowl. The advantage being not just that lots of people watch the Super Bowl, but crucially, lots of people know that lots of people watch the Super Bowl. It's almost like a national, a national holiday, almost like a religious holiday. And so Super Bowl ads, as predictable common knowledge generators, are used for products that depend on network effects, that depend on being widely adopted for their success.
Are some phenomena or norms or people immune from changes to common knowledge? And what I'm thinking of is there are lots of people who don't like Donald Trump, and they believe that Donald Trump has no clothes. And they have believed over the course of now 10 years plus that the next thing that happens will be that viral moment, which will cause the fog to lift and everyone to realize that Donald Trump has no clothes. And that's not happened. And my question is, do you think, I don't know if it's a fair question or not, if you think that the persistence of Donald Trump's popularity with a certain segment of the population, enough to get him the presidency not once but twice, reduces the likelihood that will ever happen, because now everyone knows that everyone else knows that the guy has full solid suit of Teflon. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, there's that. I think the bigger phenomenon is that what Trump has done is he's shattered norms. That norms are, going back to earlier in our conversation, there are rules of conduct that aren't actually enforced by authorities, but that exist because everyone knows they exist. They're just some things you just don't do. Why don't you do them? Well, everyone knows you don't do them. And how does that even survive?
Yeah.
Well, it survives because if you do flout it, you can expect that everyone else will come down on you like a ton of bricks in public. And that's how norms survive. What Trump did is he deliberately broke many long-standing norms, such as that politicians don't, obviously and flagrantly lie. I mean, all politicians lie, everyone lies, but usually you have to at least deny that you're lying or have it cloaked in enough plausible deniability that you may be wrong, but you're not engaged in a barefaced lie. You don't comment on the looks of your opponent, especially women. You don't flagrantly insult your colleagues, calling them the stupid, or your predecessors in office. All of these norms of decorum, which people kind of thought were invulnerable simply because anyone who flouted them, their career would be over. And before Trump, their career would be over. But he managed to show that they were, by shattering them, and not enough people coming down to challenge him and restore the norm, meant the norm no longer existed, because people no longer thought that the norm existed, because he challenged them and he got away with them. So all of these norms, and I think the fear is that once the norm is shattered, since it only exists because people think it exists, and if people don't think it exists, it doesn't exist, then he has paved the way for others. And you see that in other politicians and influencers, where there's a lot more insults, misogyny, racist comments that no one could have gotten away with 10 years ago, in-your-face trash talk, things that were just beneath the dignity of any public figure, that now that he's broken the norm, people engage in.
When a norm is shattered, is it replaced with a new norm, or is it replaced with nothing?
It could be either.
Yeah.
I mean, how norms come into being is another question, and it itself has a lot of caprice and unpredictability.
And there's nothing inherently, when we say norm, usually people mean that as a positive. But there's nothing inherently good or bad about any norm, correct?
That's right. I mean, there are norms that are and various norms and taboos that sometimes they're there just as focal points for coordination. They're common knowledge that allow people to know that they're part of a circle of people who are all agreeing to do something some way for the benefit of all of them. So, for example, it's good if everyone agrees on a particular day of the week as the day of rest, so that you stay home. You can stay home.
I pick Wednesday. Mine's Wednesday.
Yeah, the problem is, you can pick Wednesday, but everyone else is going to be at the committee meeting wondering, where are you? So it only works if everyone picks the same day. Now, it could be any day. It could be Saturday. It could be Sunday. And of course, we see there are different communities of people that pick different days, like Orthodox Jews.
The world over, China, India, every country in the world uses the same calendar. For that reason.
Yes. Why a 7-day week? Well, why not? It could be a 6-day week, could be an 8-day week. The Babylonians, for their screwball astrological reasons, lighted on 7 days. And since then, it's been self-reinforcing, because if any country had a 6-day week, they'd be so out of sync with the rest of the world that it would work to their disadvantage.
Yeah, so how can we I've been told since 6th grade, which is a long time ago for me, that we would all be on the metric system by now. How come that hasn't worked?
Well, probably because the United States is powerful enough that it can be out of sync with the rest of the world. And it's such a large internal market and so influential because of its dominance of media and business and science that it can get away with it. But smaller countries can't and don't, and have gone off the imperial system. I grew up in Canada, and I still think in terms of Fahrenheit and feet and inches. Fortunately, I moved to the United States, where my childhood system is still in force. But even when I go back home to Canada, people often don't know what I'm talking about. My nieces and nephews, when I say it's 72 degrees out, they think I'm nuts. They don't know what that means.
Steven Pinker, I know you have a lot of other interviews to do. The book is terrific. When Everyone Knows That Everyone Knows: Common Knowledge and the Mysteries of Money, Power, and Everyday Life. Thank you for your time and your insight. Good luck to you, sir.
Thanks, Preet. Appreciate it. Bye.
Hey, folks, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.